So it's good to see it. The book is really good. I've been reading it, and I really like the idea that you put those little, you know, introductions to them and everything like that. It's really good. I congratulate you on the book.
Thank you.
Very much. I'm looking forward to talking to you about this. You know. And it
Looking
was
forward
good to see it. That was a good gathering about the movie.
It was. I wish I
about
had
Fox.
seen it.
Yeah.
They overbooked by 200% at least.
Well, that does happen sometimes, I guess. But
You liked the film?
I did, and I liked the people I met there too. It was really an interesting experiment, you know.
Did you get to talk with the director?
Yes, yeah, and got the email. And welcome very much to Conversations, where it's a pleasure to welcome to the program the author of a book I want to show you right now. And it's the author is Norman MacAfee. MacAfee, I'm sorry. And it's called, maybe you can see it, maybe you can bring it in, you can see what it looks like in the bookstores now. It's just out, and it's called The Gospel According to RFK, Why It Matters. What is the subtitle again?
Why It Matters Now.
Why It Matters Now. And it's just out in the bookstores now. And we're talking with the author, and welcome very much to Conversations and to Manhattan Network.
Thank you, Harold.
Not at all. I was very impressed. I went to your website. You've had a very busy and active life. You've got a lot going.
Yes.
And this book is very good and very timely. But I wonder, maybe you could, Norman, if you would you share a little of your own, you know, personal background, where you were born and raised, that sort of thing. And then we'll get into a discussion of, well, maybe the state of the world and why the vision of Robert Kennedy is perhaps relevant. Particularly, we're coming up to the Democratic Convention now.
Exactly.
So, but could you share some of your own personal background?
Yes, politics and culture, they're very interesting to me. I was born outside of Philadelphia in a Republican family. Amazing.
Never let a Roosevelt dime in the house, huh?
This is it. I think my grandparents voted for the Roosevelt the second time around, because everybody did.
Yeah,
apparently.
right. Yeah, I see.
But I saw the light after I was about 20, and I became a Democrat, more or less, and progressive.
Yeah.
Life made me that. My family background made me a Republican. I learned recently that I'm a very distant relative. I mean, sixth cousin, four times removed of our heaviest president. Taft.
Really? All
yes.
right. That's interesting.
And the Tafts are doing, you know, they're still in politics.
Ohio, a swing state.
Ohio. we want Ohio.
Yeah.
And one of the Tafts is in the State Department and did a legal opinion about the Abu Ghraib prison.
I see.
And it was very humane.
Yeah.
So I was rather proud of him for that, even though he's probably a Republican.
Oh, right. It was pretty staggering, wasn't it?
Wasn't it?
Wasn't it something awful?
Well, visuals are always just, you know, too extraordinary.
Yeah, in the modern experience, increasingly, we probably wouldn't have had so much to do if there was not a videotape of Rodney King being beat about the head and body. So viciously. It's got a powerful...
It does.
Yeah.
One of the other works I've done is translated an Italian poet who was a great filmmaker, Pier Paolo Pasolini. Pier Paolo Pasolini. His final film, he was assassinated. I tend to be interested in people who...
martyrs, we have
not martyrs. I wouldn't say martyrs, but people who are cut off because they're talking, they're saying interesting things, or in interesting places.
That happens to martyrs often.
That's true.
Yeah.
Martyrs have a religious connotation that we maybe could get into later.
Yeah. But you've been involved in things cultural, and you're a translator. Yeah.
Yes.
And
the Pasolini, I would just say, his last work is perhaps the most scandalous film ever made. It's based on a text by the Marquis de Sade. It's about the last days of Mussolini's regime. Pasolini was a Marxist, and he grew up. He was born in 1922. He grew up under under fascism and was very much against it,
Mm-hmm.
and fought, as he said, with the weapons of poetry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
And
I like that line.
yes, that's great. That's a great line.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have too.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But his final film, Salo, is visuals
Mhm.
of these horrible things that de Sade also wrote about,
Yeah,
but didn't
right.
show.
Uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
so Pasolini's film is the most scandalous movie ever made.
I'll be darned. What's it called again? I'm sorry?
Salo, S-A-L-O,
Uh-huh.
with an accent.
Yeah.
The 120 Days of Sodom.
I see. Really? Yeah.
It's a great movie,
Did
but
was it
unwatchable
yeah.
in some ways.
Was it underground? Was it released?
No, it was released. It was
yeah.
United Artists.
Oh,
You know,
right.
They didn't know what to do with it.
Right.
They
Did
didn't-
it get around at all?
It
or-
got around after.
When was it done? If I may?
75.
75. Yeah. Okay. Uh-huh.
He actually hadn't. He had just finished it, and then was murdered.
Oh, really?
You know. So again,
Go on.
people talking, people expressing themselves,
Uh-huh.
and then suddenly being no longer able to do this because they're shot or
Yeah. Right.
or beaten to death, as Pasolini was.
One thinks of, and particularly one of the letters in your thing is Martin Luther King,
Yes.
right in Memphis, and that, and right at, you know, he presaged it by saying, "I've been to the mountain." That amazing speech he gave the night before he was,
What was that?
gunned down, or
was that?
Robert Kennedy himself.
Who could have imagined
Or
that?
Robert Kennedy himself. I
Yes.
remember I was in Los Angeles when that happened, and it was just absolutely stunning. What a terrible time it was in
Mhm.
'68. I mean, but I wonder, what about your back? You went to school and you.
Yes, I
Uh-huh.
went through the public school system of suburban Philadelphia,
Mhm.
and then the University of Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah.
Where I started as an English major and ended up being a creative writing major,
Okay.
and discovering poetry and writing it seriously for the first time.
Yeah.
And then went to the University of Iowa Writers Workshop, which is the mother of all writers workshops.
Is it really? I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah, it's
Is
the
that
first.
in
It was the
Grinnell
first.
or is
it's
that Ames?
It's in Iowa City.
Oh, it's in Iowa City.
And
They got a really good creative writing
they have the
department?
best.
I didn't
The
realize
most
that.
famous.
I didn't know. Are there certain people there?
but
that
it's
are
also
yeah.
it's also something that it's had its. I wonder, can you teach writing? I wonder, can you crank out writers who are teachers of writing, which is essentially what any workshop does. So when I went there for 2 years, extraordinary things happening. It was during the Vietnam War also.
Yeah, oh boy.
As I was studying Chinese poetry and writing poems about, influenced by Chinese poetry of the Tang Dynasty and the great Chinese poets like Li Bo and Du Fu, who lived in very interesting times, as they say, the curse.
Yeah.
That I found so similar to what we were going through in the 60s in Vietnam, with Vietnam.
The calligraphy is so gorgeous as an art form.
It is.
And the paintings with the misty mountains and things. There's a whole school of art and something that came out of China. The haiku, is that Chinese or
no,
Japanese?
that's Japanese.
Yeah.
It's Japanese.
Shinto or
Shinto is
yeah.
Japanese.
Okay.
Chinese, basically, the two poets, and I'll just talk a minute about it. But you know, it's culture. It's important. It's important to know about other cultures, and I say that to us living in Bush's America, where it's very much discouraged to know about anything, but certainly anything that isn't about America. It's this horrible narcissism of this culture. And we have to get over that. I mean, I love living here.
Yeah, I love America. I love New York.
Yes.
But boy, we got
I
some
love the
hang-ups.
whole country. I loved when I was in Iowa.
Yeah, right.
But the people there are wonderful.
Yeah.
And the country, the plains.
Yeah.
But it's like China. My teacher, his name was Cheng Zi.
Yeah.
He taught us poetry and.
This was in Iowa?
In Iowa.
Yeah, right.
He taught us. He was from China, and he taught us painting, Chinese painting, and Chinese opera, which is a whole great genre.
Is
you
it
know,
really?
stuff.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. The opera has a rich tradition in China.
in China
Yeah.
before European opera, you know, 1,000 years before European opera, Chinese opera. It's hard to listen to. It's a different tonality completely.
It is. It's hard. It's hard to, but it is. It's
But it's
a
great,
rich
and it goes
classical
on.
tradition.
It goes on for 26 hours, 28 hours sometimes. Some of
The opera.
the opera. An opera,
26
you'll
hours?
say, okay, I'm going to
Set
set aside this time.
I better get a mattress to lie on or something to take it in. Yeah.
It was a
That's
different kind of.
It's like Andy Warhol making.
In those days, they had all the time.
Yeah. Oh, right. There was plenty of time.
Yes.
I see, yeah.
But so that time is 68 and 760 A.D. In China. I'm estimating. China was suffering from this terrible civil war called the Anlo-Shan Rebellion, and people were just, being, killed right and left, and everything was in upheaval.
Yeah.
It was terrible. And a week before 9/11, I was reading. In 2001, I was reading a biography of one of these poets, Libo, by a British translator of his. And he described the Empress of China at the time as having overreached. She built this great tower called the Ming Tong, and it was a replica of the originating symbol of China, the Ming Tong, basically just a shack, a humble place. And the Empress built this, the Twin Towers.
Yeah.
No, not the Twin Towers, but put all the country's thought into making a symbol of
her glorious rule.
Yes, overweening pride and power. And forgetting everything else, letting the domestic programs go to pot, not helping the people.
Drew an analogy or two, did you?
I was. It was just amazing when I was reading it, and I was emailing it to friends and saying, the Ming Tong, this is amazing. And I was thinking Bush with his strategic defense policy, which what he was doing at that time, he was throwing all our money into strategic defense to defend us against missiles.
Yeah.
And of course, the real problem was terrorism, which he wasn't focused on at all. And then the towers came down, and I just felt so prescient.
Yeah, I see.
Alas.
Yeah, alas, indeed.
Alas.
You lived down the village, right?
Yeah,
Not
a
far
mile
from there.
on West 11th Street. And it was. We woke up, and my partner's sister called from Mexico.
Yeah.
We were just getting ready to go, and she said, "Are you okay?" And we said, "Yeah, sure."
Oh, you didn't even know?
Fine. And she said, "Turn on the television." And we saw the one tower burning, and then the other, and then the plane going.
It was quite an amazing event. Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Wake-up call, I guess, is overworked term, but what
it
is
was something. It was something. But it's something that it's an event that all of us participated in somehow, and it's what we make of it. And it's not something that we should let others impose a meaning on. At any rate,
the pundits and
and the president.
And the gang in charge.
The gang in charge.
Yeah.
So we went down and to the street, and the street was already flooded with multitudes of ash-covered people flooding up, and one person was walking down 6th Avenue. Everybody else was walking up from the World Trade Center, and that person was Ramsey Clark.
No kidding.
He's like 6 feet 8, and he was walking just, and it was in a way a sort of higher form of.
Did you follow in his footsteps?
Ambulance chasing.
Did you follow him?
No, I was scared.
Oh, I see. Right.
We went to church.
Ramsey Clark is bigger than life. He ought to get the Nobel Peace Prize, I think.
Well, yes.
I mean, for calling truth to power, as they say. He's been at it forever.
Has he sat in this chair?
Yeah, we've done three programs with Ramsey some time ago. I know he came on a program and defended Libya a week or two after they were bombed. So he's on the spot. He He was he and John Alpert, who's now they're doing down at this fire station down in Chinatown, and Amy's doing that wonderful program, Democracy Now.
Okay.
John Alpert and he went when the bombing happened in the first Gulf War. They didn't do anything. They got in if I understand it right, they just went and they got an airplane and they went with the cameras. They went and got a car in Jordan and drove to Iraq, and they're showing all the stuff going on. And they just went and then immediately went to the pharmaceutical plant in Sudan when that was bombed by Mr. Clinton, and it was another mistake that we did, and that sort of thing, and everything. So he's called that, and he was the first one to put up a thing about impeach the man, I think. Francis Boyle maybe beat him to the punch or something, I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah, he was on his way down there. Anyway, so you had this, and I know I've seen in your bio and that kind of thing, you translate, you're a translator. And also, I don't want to, we want to get to this book, because it's really a handsome and it's apropos and right to the moment and so forth. But you've also been involved in a long opera called The Forest or something.
It's called The Death of the Forest.
Okay,
this is a very rare edition put out by the director of the opera in the Netherlands. It's called The Death of the Forest, and I used the music of Charles Ives.
Oh, great!
And our first great composer. His symphonies and yes, well, I don't think our first great classical composer.
Okay.
We've had other great composers before then, but it's about the first Indian War in New England, King Philip's War.
Is this your work?
It's my work.
I mean,
and I chose
the libretto, or
the
what
libretto,
is the libretto?
The whole opera is my work.
And it's been quite a long time you've been working on it. No, but you're
all my life in a way.
All right, good. Okay, good. That's really good. You're honing, getting that. And if I'm not mistaken, I want to get it in because I think it's going to be performed.
It's going to be produced. It's being produced in the Netherlands.
Congratulations!
By a wonderful choreographer who has a dance company and who is working with other companies to make a production next year. And it'll tour here. We're they're in negotiations with various festivals here to bring it here. It's called The Death of the Forest. It's quite wonderful because I can say that because Ives is I'm using Ives's music. He wanted to write an opera, and he never got around to it. So I feel I can do that. In a way, it's like bringing back Robert Kennedy's words, including the very last words he said, which was, "Is everybody else okay?"
Is that the last words?
Yes.
That was on the floor of that hotel kitchen in Los Angeles.
Yes.
Is everybody else?
The last intelligible words.
Oh boy, that was something. I want to get to the book. We could talk about that, and congratulations.
Thank you so much,
Because it's a long-term work, I understand. You've been working on it and so forth, and I hope it just smashes all box office records and everybody goes to see the opera and so forth.
Oh, yes.
And because Charles Ives is great, I know that. But now, the book. When did you get the idea, the book about him, and explain what it is, and then let's talk about the book and about the personality and about the times he lived in and that we live in now and the relevancy of the two, perhaps.
Well, again, let me go back to Pasolini just briefly.
Oh, absolutely.
The Italian poet. The first great work of his I saw was a film called The Gospel, according to St. Matthew.
Oh, really?
And essentially he took Italian neorealistic documentary technique and filmed a straight rendition of St. Matthew's Gospel. There's all the words are Matthew and Jesus and all the other people in that story. It's wonderful. It's filmed with poor people in the country, the south of Italy, in ruins. It's so affecting and great. I think it's the greatest. So Pasolini's murdered. In '75, Bobby in '68. I'm sure that he saw The Gospel according to Matthew.
I expect,
I would think so, because he was a cultured person. He strove to continue to be cultured, Robert Kennedy.
Even as he was political.
Yes. Well, they are inextricably linked, even if
You
you
think
try
that
to.
politics and
Oh, yes.
philosophy and,
And
culture?
Sure,
You can't lead a
you
life
can't-
of. Oh, that's interesting to take up on. You don't think you
Mhm.
can lead a life of just
art for
art
art's
for art's sake and that sort of thing, and just beauty is beauty in the whole mind of the beholder and all that, and politics is all
I
just
think
a bunch
if you're
of
living in the worst of all possible kinds of
scoundrels.
times, like if you lived in Mussolini's Italy or Hitler's Germany, you might have to do art for art's sake, just keep your
sanity.
in order to.
Yeah.
But also, I think in America, in the post-war, during the Cold War, there seemed to be a censorship against. Well, we know there was a censorship against against politics in art, against homosexuality in art, against
blacks. I mean,
yes,
civil rights. It hadn't happened.
Oh, absolutely. The
they still had
50s. The
apartheid in
50s
the
were,
South,
you know, white bread, and so. Well, about the book then.
Yes. Okay.
I had wanted to make a film of Robert Kennedy's presidential campaign, which lasted 81 days, from March 16th to June 4th, when he was shot and killed, and died. 20 hours later, he died June 6th.
He didn't die on the floor of the
No,
kitchen?
no, but he was.
It's indelibly in my brain, the television images of him lying on that floor in the kitchen of was the Ambassador Hotel, was it, or what was it? I forget. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's a detail, but
Yes.
in
Well,
Los
you know,
Angeles.
part of the reason I did
He
this
said, now
was
we've won,
because-
now on to New York.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Exactly. On to Chicago, where the
On to
convention was.
Chicago, that's right, yeah.
And New York. He was going to come to New York.
Well,
to,
he was going
to be in the primary. And
He was going
running.
to, if I may, he was going to come to New York to go to a meeting that Abe Hirschfeld, who was his very close friend, and Abe was one of the pallbearers that the family invited to be.
wow.
They were very close. And he was going to come, and he talked to him just a couple of hours before that happened, and he had to say he wasn't coming to New York because of something. But
Because of
anyway,
this,
yeah.
Well, where were we?
Well, we were talking about the man himself, and that you had completed him to Pasolini and that sort of thing. But the fact that he had a political campaign, he had announced for presidency. The situation in the country was very bleak. The Vietnam thing was spinning out of control. Mr. Johnson had already given his talk where he said, "I will not run again." He announced before.
So,
Maybe you could set up the time. Maybe for some of the younger people, you could set up the drama of the time. It's Shakespearean.
It is. It is.
Yeah,
It's Shakespearean, definitely. And Bobby liked to read Shakespeare and listen to Shakespeare tapes while he showered. People would. New York intellectuals would laugh at him because of that, and scorn him because
and the ancient Greeks
because he was just so
cultured.
Well, he wanted to be cultured.
Yeah,
you know, he wanted to be more cultured. He wanted to.
And I think you said somewhere, if I'm not, I don't want to put words, but you said that he had out of when his brother had been a lot of horror they had. He in a certain sense escaped to the classics. When he was in time of great grief, when his brother was assassinated.
I think Jacqueline gave him a copy of The Greek Way by Edith Hamilton, and he began reading that and then reading the plays, and how to exist in the world when your heart is broken. You know, so when Martin Luther King was assassinated. Martin Luther King was assassinated, I think, April 4th.
It was April '68, yeah.
April 4th,
yeah,
during the campaign.
Yeah, down in Memphis. Right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And Robert Kennedy was
had to go to Indianapolis.
He was in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
He was just the plane was just landing in Indianapolis, and he was supposed to give a speech at in an African American neighborhood, and the people there didn't know.
They didn't even know it had happened.
No,
That was that.
And he had to break the news.
What a
And he was warned by the local police chief, to just stay away. It's going to be dangerous.
Right.
But
Mr.
he
Johnson,
was very brave.
Mr. Johnson did stay away.
And
at the time he was president, he stayed away from
the funeral to go to the funeral. Yes. Yeah. So there was a certain courage,
and the country
which
burst
is
into You know,
Yeah.
I remember that. It was just incredible.
Yes,
yeah.
but Robert Kennedy didn't burst into tears. If I had to
Yeah.
read this speech to you
Yeah.
and to the audience,
That's what you've got
I would
here,
not
isn't it?
get through it.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
I would not get through it. I've tried, and I just, you know, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how Robert Kennedy was able to well up, but not do the ugly cry,
And
as
he ended
it's
something
called,
by
you
the
know.
terrible something of grace. or
Yes, he
something.
he quotes Aeschylus
Yes,
from
Aeschylus, yeah.
Agamemnon. In our sleep. Oh, sorry. What is it? Let's get it right.
Can you find it? You probably can.
I can.
It's your
and
book.
It's my book.
Maybe while you're doing that, I'll say it's a number of his speeches during that period when he was running for president and so forth.
Just that.
And it's got commentary leading each one, setting the tone of the nation and that sort of thing by the author. This is being Norman MacAfee here.
Yes. Well, he's broken the news.
To
and
this
it's
group
very-
in
yes, and
Indianapolis that
It's
Dr.
not a
King-
speech that anybody helped him write. It's all extemporaneous.
Yeah.
All the other speeches people helped him write.
Yeah.
But you know, they're his speeches. But this amazing moment was all him, and I'm not going to read the whole speech because you will see just buckets. But he says at one point, my favorite poet was Aeschylus. He wrote, in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart until in our own despair against our will comes wisdom through the awful grace of God.
Yeah, right. God.
And
he had a bit
you
of
know,
he had the poem. Yeah, and these things had meaning to him, and he was.
and he pulled it out of his experience.
Right.
You know,
So, and we were
obviously.
in the middle of those people who may not remember, some younger people. That was the middle of the Vietnam thing. Mr.
Yes.
Johnson had been
It was
escalating the war.
Exactly. It was there
we
was
were
a lot
coming
was
up-
at stake. A lot was at stake. Young people were being drafted. I was in danger of being drafted. I became a conscientious objector.
You did. Okay.
But other, you know, so many people went. There's a cutting off point. If you know, I say at one point in some of my commentary that if Robert Kennedy had become president, 40,000 Americans wouldn't have died in Vietnam because he would have ended the war. 20,000 had already died.
Yeah,
60,000 died finally, but those 40,000 wouldn't have died because he would have ended the war.
Not to mention
And the Vietnamese, the 2 million Vietnamese who,
I've seen
who died.
figures it's between 3 and 4.
Well, there were 1 million already dead.
Yeah.
And then there were 2 million or more who died after Richard Nixon became president.
Right,
you know.
because we had to find peace.
So
with
what happened was Robert Kennedy was assassinated, and Hubert Humphrey became the Democratic nominee, and Richard Nixon won by it was a squeaker.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you know,
he had
and
Wallace
he
right
had
in
a
the South.
yes, and he had a secret plan to end the war, and the war ended what 7 years after the election.
Yeah, it's just strung out.
7 years.
And we've killed.
And all those things that we could have done with all that money that we spent, all those lives that we lost.
For what
Robert
mission?
Kennedy has a wonderful
Okay,
moment where he, I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but he talks about the young people who are in Vietnam now, and one of them, of course, was John Kerry.
Yes, that's right.
And John Kerry was a
How
great.
can you ask the
great
man to be the last man to die for a
Yes.
mistake? And that's what Mr. McNamara tells us in The Fog of War. We killed 4 million, maybe 4 million people with napalm, children, violated our moral spirit for a mistake. It's a lesson that might have some sort of resonance and meaning in terms of the current situation as far as Iraq and other places around the world.
I would think so, Harold.
Okay,
I would think so.
yeah.
But this is very beautiful, and he said it several times, and I'll just, you know, it's just 5 sentences, and it's, as we stand here today, brave young men are fighting across an ocean. Here, while the moon shines, men are dying on the other side of the earth. Which of them might have written a great poem?
Yeah, right.
Which of them would have cured cancer? It goes on. It is our responsibility to let those men live.
Yeah.
You know.
Tell us a little bit your understanding. You understanding of the man. He was a real progressive. He was really concerned for the plight.
Right.
He was in his soul concerned about the plight of the less advantaged.
Definitely.
They were
it
doing
was-
some definite things. A lot of things good were going on in the Great Society, war on poverty,
Right.
voting rights things,
Oh,
all that kind of
absolutely.
stuff was happening. The civil rights thing. The federal government was being called at the service of getting over the segregation problems
Oh,
that exist in the
absolutely.
country. So there was a lot of things going on of a progressive
And he
nature.
took part
and he
in-
was at the core of
he was
that.
at the core.
He had earlier been involved with Mr. McCarthy.
with
as a young
Joe
man.
McCarthy, absolutely.
Joe McCarthy,
So
yeah.
many New York liberals of a certain age. I have a dear friend in our building
Yeah.
in Greenwich Village
Yeah.
who, when I told her I was writing this book, you know, I knew that she was not a Bobby
That
Kennedy
red
fan, and
baiter,
she said,
huh?
she said, yeah, well, you know, I love you, so I'm gonna read it,
the book, yeah.
and I'll change my opinion, and she did. But he changed his opinion.
It's a
He
mark
was-
of a
it
wise
is.
person.
To
isn't it?
admit
to be able
mistakes
to
or
admit
to-
mistakes. It would be good if we had a president that could maybe do that, possibly, right?
Wouldn't
Well,
it?
wouldn't it,
it?
though? Yeah,
Wouldn't
right,
it though?
yeah.
So that's, I mean, the reason I wanted to bring him back into
Yeah.
our consciousness.
Mhm.
I mean, he'll stay in our history.
Yeah.
He's sort of, I consider him the greatest president we never had. And he ran for president. I mean, Benjamin Franklin maybe was another greatest president we never had, but he never ran for president.
Yeah.
Bobby did,
Yeah.
and he had a bunch of plans, and essentially they break down into two areas: end the war and create an art of peace. I mean, one of the essays one of his speeches I call the art of peace. That includes, you know, being true to your tradition and honoring your traditional allies. In this case, it was the European allies. France were horrified at what the United States was doing in Vietnam. They had already been through it, you know, and knew that they had made the mistakes, and they saw America making the same mistakes. So,
For a mistake. It was a mistake. And John Kerry had that
That's
memorable...
right.
But John Kerry, having won the medals and so forth, and he
Yes.
came back and said,
How do you ask a man-
the last man to die for a mistake?
mistake.
Memorable line.
Yes, it's a great line.
And it's something that could be issued again today in these times, perhaps? I don't know. Maybe we don't want to get into
I
that.
would like John
Yeah.
Kerry to do that.
Yeah,
you know, I
right.
would like John Kerry to do
Yeah,
that.
he's sort of, because it was a horrible, it's hard for people to remember. It was such a riveting kind of thing, and much of the world saw it that way. And it just dragged on, and we were, why is that? Maybe you could share with me. We're asking our boys and that to do that, and dropping, remember napalm? Horrible stuff.
Which is basically liquid gasoline.
Liquid petroleum
I mean,
that gets on, and they developed special ones where they couldn't wash it off, so it just keep burning the flesh right through to the bone and beyond. And it was it dropped on women and children, and we were doing that against some godless communism thing we were fighting or something. And why is that not? If you could, maybe you could share with me or something. What would Mr. Kennedy have thought? I think he did. I think he felt that very strongly. That why is that act of war, in that sense that we were doing, not a terrorist attitude toward the world? And no one ever went in the dock. Has anyone ever in the history of the universe gone to where the strong ever go in the dock for the ills that they deliver down upon the people? No one ever has. I mean, it's
Well, I'd love
only
to
if they're
see it.
overthrown.
I'd love to see it, yeah. I mean, Pinochet, that was fun to see
That's where we're-
Pinochet, you know, brought to justice somewhat, you know. Not really, but because he's gotten out of, but you know, it's all sorts of legalities are maybe going to finally bring Pinochet to justice in Chile.
But they usually have to fall in order to go in the dock.
They do.
Even though some of the worst sins are created by those who
I
write
think
the
so.
history, who are the victors, and
I
some
think
of the
so.
worst atrocities delivered down on mankind are by the people who are celebrated.
Vietnam is you know is something
And nobody
that
went in the dock.
Nobody went in the
Nobody
dock.
from the American side ever had to face up to that.
Well, Cowley.
And-
I mean, the
Well,
the
one
lower
little lieutenant.
Yeah, the lower.
That's sort
the
of like Abu
lieutenants and-
Ghraib.
Exactly.
So it's always going to be down the line. You got pliable or what deniability,
Plausible
deniability, and that sort of thing and everything. But
That's
you
a
understand what I'm
Bushism.
saying? That's a large theme, isn't it? I mean,
It
the
is.
idea that so they talk so glibly about terrorism and so forth, but that was why is that acts of war by the strong against the weak, let's say in this case, not terrorism?
I would,
and what
I would remind
differentiates
you.
it?
I would remind you that during the Vietnam War, two sages, two wise men, Lord Russell, Bertrand Russell,
Yes.
who was 95 at the time, and Jean-Paul Sartre, who was 65 at the time. And I've translated Sartre's letters.
Yeah, right.
And I've always loved him because he set up a tribunal to investigate the American atrocities, the American war against Vietnam.
Ramsey Clark and those people have done that too.
Yes.
Yeah, they set it up. It's mocked, but it hasn't got. And Mr. Bush is against the International Criminal Court.
I know.
Because
I know.
and no, we have to be accused.
We have to stop that. We have to be. America has to be held accountable.
Because we.
No, of course, then.
No, but they're not to be held accountable. That's what I'm saying. They're not to be held accountable as long as they stay strong. It's like mafia bosses.
It is.
It's like mafia bosses fighting for the territory. If Al Capone wins out over Dutch Schultz, then he can do whatever he wants in a certain sense. There's an element of that. And why wouldn't the world population at some point wake up to that and maybe get sort of really exercised and outraged by the inadequacy of the mafiosa things that the leaders of the world have tended to do all through human history?
Well, yes. History, culture, and politics. I think of one of the great leaders of what used to be Iraq, what was of Assyria, which was Iraq.
Yeah.
In 700 BC, Ashurbanipal. There's all the wonderful artwork from that period. A lot of it at the Met.
Yeah.
Those great, I forget what they're called. Beings. They're men. They're lions. They're eagles. And they're the guardians of these of Assyrian civilization. Babylonian civilization, which was our civilization, and for us for the United States, which is America is very wonderful, but for it to wage war against the founding civilization, the site of the founding civilization. I mean, we bomb where Babylon is. We bomb the Tigris and the Euphrates. The Fertile Crescent, where everything began. What are we doing? It's like
it's surreal.
It
is
suicidal. It's suicidal because what we're doing is destroying our origins. And if we do that, then it's all over.
What do you think Bobby Kennedy would have had to say about the current situation? We talk now.
Well, he'd be very old.
We come up to the.
He'd talk like Katharine Hepburn, probably.
Yeah. Oh, right. Oh, that's strong. Yeah.
But well, I mean, I don't know. He changed so much.
He felt this stuff strongly, didn't he? Yeah.
He felt also about community and African Americans
and the oppressed.
And and Native Americans and
rightly so.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a lot of Native Americans considered him one of theirs, and one of them, I forget who it is, Vine Deloria maybe, said that he considered Robert Kennedy an Indian warrior, a white crazy horse, because he had a reputation for being ruthless. He was his brother's enforcer in a way,
Attorney General,
especially as Attorney General.
Yeah, but he was,
and he got things done.
Yeah, he got things done. But what he was doing was he taking federal troops down to get some kids into school.
Absolutely,
that seems to be. If you're going to use it, that's a good use.
He was enforcing justice.
He was like Atticus
and equality.
Finch.
Yeah,
he like Atticus Finch with moxie and power. And maybe that's a different kind of thing than standing in the way of that, I mean, but the book, so you've got a number of his speeches, number of his speeches.
About 23, I think it is.
23 of major speeches between the time when he announced and that, and you set the context of the nation at that time, and then before each of the speeches, you set the context. Your editor wanted you to do that. I'm glad she did.
I'm so glad
because I think that
did.
adds a lot to the book. You're setting that context, if I may say so. I've read it. It's really a good book.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, she suggested the subtitle, Why It Matters Now, and I said, but it isn't an it. The gospel is my idea. He didn't write a gospel, but she convinced me that it works, and I think it works very well.
I wonder if this is the way the Gospels were finally put together along about, through decades or hundreds of years after.
Jesus didn't write any of them. Other people wrote them down and so on. And I'm not a believer.
Yeah.
I guess I'm an agnostic, but I was very happy to write a gospel. And one of my, aside from the Pasolini movie, another model was Thomas Jefferson's edition of the Gospels, where he cuts out all the faith-based stuff, you know, miracles and so on.
Yeah, that was
and
his
just,
Bible.
Yeah, and he just gave us a Jesus who fought for peace and fought to raise up the poor and fought for justice. You know, so how wonderful.
Yeah.
And that's what Bobby Kennedy represents to me. Other people could write a book about Bobby Kennedy in the 50s, and people have done books about, you know, the whole life. And this is just for something for somebody to put in their pocket, carry around, quote from, you know, so many great quotes in here.
Yet there are.
You know, and I mean, here's one. Together we can make ourselves a nation that spends more on books than on bombs, more on hospitals than the terrible tools of war, more on decent houses than military aircraft. You know, that just about says it all, I think.
Yeah, right. Wouldn't he be upset with the state of affairs currently?
Today? I
mean,
think so.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Of course, if he were alive, I don't think we'd be in the state of affairs that we are, because
if
he would have had an
power.
Well, no, if he had had an 8-year presidency, he would have been finished in 1976. 77.
Second 200th anniversary of the nation, it might have been a whole different kind of
It would have
nation
been,
if that had been able to be,
Mm-hmm.
because those are horrible years, the Vietnam thing. And he was ready to get out of the Vietnam thing.
Totally,
Yeah.
yes. I mean,
and a lot of good people are ready. Do you see analogies with Iraq?
I do.
Or do you see analogies between that and that? We've had Mr. Kucinich all along, you know, soldiering on and so forth, and others who have stood, we got to get out. You know, we got to face that. Now, are we going to drag it out like we did in Vietnam, where all these people are going to die and so forth before the last person leaves on the... Remember from Saigon, they were hanging on to the tires of the last helicopter out of Saigon,
and in fact,
finally they left.
In fact, there was a horrible incident, just horrible, and I'll remind viewers and tell viewers who don't know about it, but America put like 200 babies in an airplane and escorted them out of Vietnam, and the plane crashed.
Really?
And the babies died.
Babies,
you know, they were escaping communism, so they were really better dead than red.
They used to have that expression, better dead than red, and that was the great bogeyman of that time.
It was the big bogeyman,
which has now been defeated, apparently.
Yes, and now
I don't know whether that whole
the right wing is in total charge and is looking for a new enemy, and it's the Democrats. It's terrorists.
Ill-defined term, isn't it?
It's an ill-defined term. I think it's a mistake to have a war on terrorism.
It's like the war on drugs or the war on
exactly.
injustice.
It doesn't work. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. War on poverty didn't work.
Yeah.
Robert Kennedy was against.
It was a noble effort. There was a lot of good stuff.
There was a lot, but it was
Start,
heavy.
A whole lot of things.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
It was heavy on the bureaucracy, and Robert Kennedy wanted to cut through that, and that was his disagreement with the war on poverty in the Great Society. It was too much throwing money at things. He had you remember, a plan to bring industry into small communities, not small communities necessarily, poor communities. And he started in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn.
Absolutely. I remember that,
Yeah, and, you know, got a lot of the people, you know, he'd go to corporations on Park Avenue and talk, and they were going, what is Robert Kennedy doing in my boardroom? I hate him. And only one corporation actually opened a plant in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and that was IBM, which has had a progressive character to it. I think it was 40,000 jobs were created, or something. Maybe not that many, but a better housing stock was created. The community was better, and it became a model for about thousands of other similar community action
they were
agencies or community action groups
Yeah, and they were very much
all over the country.
Right, and they were very much into the idea of...
And that was his idea.
Right, it was. And they were very much into that community development idea from the grounds up. I know I saw some people who were working around the world where they were trying to get people... I lived in Bolivia for a couple of years, did a dissertation, lived among them. They had Peace Corps in those days. They had Peace Corps people, and people would get together and they'd make a school, and they would do it themselves by their own effort, and then they would have to get calamina or the tin roof, and then that was done. But the impetus was coming from the people. We still got problems because it's all top-down. All over the world is top-down. The world is all plutocratic and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But they were very much interested in community involvement, community participatory patterns of political and economic organization and everything. He was very committed.
Threw himself...
That's a very positive, progressive idea.
There's a phrase from the 60s, to throw your body into the struggle.
On the machine.
No, to throw your body into the struggle.
Oh, okay.
And that's what he did. He threw his body into the struggle. He visited places that bourgeois people don't visit, and people in bureaucracies,
disdain.
Mississippi Delta hovels, shacks where people are starving, children are starving. He visited them and he sat on their beds and he comforted them. And then he got food stamps for them.
Yeah, they did. That was a big thing. That helped an awful lot of people.
He helped. But in order to help, you have to throw your body into the struggle. You have to go out into the world. And he did that much more than President Kennedy. He was much more an existential adventurer, and I don't know if we have time to talk about the existentialist aspect of his life.
Please
he was
do.
He was very influenced by Camus, not Sartre, Albert Camus, the other major existentialists of the time, and read Camus' essays after his brother was killed. Also, it was the Greeks and it was the existentialists, which got him through. It wasn't religion. Religion was, I think, part of his life, but he didn't wear it on a sleeve, as Ron Reagan says. Bush does now.
Ron's going to address the Democrat. It'll be, as we're talking, we'll be in the middle of the Democratic Convention as this airs, as this program airs.
Yes,
and
I'm so happy. That's very good timing.
Yeah, he's going to talk on stem cell research, which I think is really something very interesting, because that's something that is very important, that kind of thing. But you've done all these things, and you're an admirer, obviously, of Robert Kennedy and that sort of thing. And he ought to be remembered, and particularly now in the season of the Democratic Convention and he had an influence in that part of the party. They talk about the brief shining moment, or 68, 70 in terms of idealism and the thought that we can really change things. Things were happening in a very large tableau, in a large sense. There was a moment of optimism and so forth. And it's interesting that the neocons who are now in social control, they have a tremendous, tremendously deep, that I've seen in body language and that sort of thing, animus toward everything that was the 60s.
Yes.
They thought it was just licentious, sex and drugs and rock and roll, irresponsibility and all of that, and they call what they've got now responsible and that sort of thing.
Yes.
But it was
lying about taking the country to war. That's very responsible.
Yeah, right. No. But and what's happened? That's liberal. We have no more. We have. It seems to me. Maybe you can set me straight. We don't have any Rockefeller Republicans anymore. Moderate Republicans, as far as I can tell. I don't know.
I think there
maybe two.
On
it's
the fingers of your hand.
It's gone.
In the Senate.
And the charge of liberal. We've had Mario Cuomo and all these people that have been able to speak in this liberal tradition that he represents, was a rich tradition. It's a valuable part of the Democratic Party, largely from Franklin Roosevelt on, has somehow had a tremendous bad rap developed down upon it lately, and that sort of thing. And there's an election coming up, and they're going to be, what's happened to that liberal tradition? Why can it not be claimed? Why is it that we've gotten to this state where these things that he was proclaiming, moral principles, organizational principles, why have we collectively as a society allowed those ideals, which are serving the least among us, as the Gospels ask us all to do, have become to be in such a pretty, a desperate strait of not being relevant to those who wield power in our society? And what can we or should we attempt to do about redressing the balance, do you think?
Well, there's some sort of probably mathematical equation about power where at a certain point it accumulates so much that it becomes impossible to destroy, and then and then other power that opposes it slowly builds up, and that's you and me, and this guy, and the people who oppose preemptive wars and tax cuts for the rich.
Full spectrum dominance.
Yes.
Full spectrum dominance with nuclear bunker busting, nuclear tactical
we're
weapons.
We're actually doing nuclear weapons.
Military presence in 130 countries around the world.
Robert Kennedy's grave site has quotes, and one of them that's etched in marble, and one of them is the Aeschylus, which we read again. In our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God. And that's about suffering, and acknowledging suffering, and recognizing that people suffer, going into the Mississippi Delta and seeing the children starving, and doing something about it. Then you can do something about it. He was a rich man.
Plutocrat.
He was a rich man, but he didn't you know, advocate tax cuts for the rich and getting richer. He advocated helping those who had less than he did.
Noblesse.
Much less.
Is that an overword? Is that a term, noblesse oblige? Is that a negative thing?
It could be. It could be because it's from the old aristocratic European societies. But the other
But there's a responsibility to the broader society by the people who have been blessed by good circumstance, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. There should be.
I mean, that's part of a moral principle somewhere. I don't know if you call it obligation.
I mean, if all the rich people in the world were like the Rockefellers or the Kennedys, especially the Kennedys, we'd be in a hell of a lot better shape. This is the other piece from his, which is at his gravesite, and it was a speech he had given from a speech he had given in 1966 in South Africa, encouraging the anti-apartheid movement. It is from numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time a man stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. And he said that in, 20 years before.
Those are his words, or are they quoting?
That's his speech, the speech that he gave.
Did he do his own writing? Did he have writers? Or?
Well, he had writers. He had 5 people who helped him a lot, including Theodore Sorensen.
Sorensen helped
and Adam Walensky and Peter Edelman and Jack Newfield. But they were his speeches. I've seen texts, typed texts, and they're Bobby scribbles all over them, and they hung out and they developed what they were going to say. And he was very busy. He was, trying to save the world.
Yeah, right. And he had responsibilities. Governmental responsibilities.
Very few politicians write their own speeches.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
I think maybe Lincoln was the last.
Lincoln was something else.
Or maybe Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah. I'm not sure about FDR,
Grant wrote well after.
Apparently, yes. I haven't read those.
Yeah, right,
I would like to.
Yeah, but anyway, but Bobby, what, so maybe it's a dialectic, we should all read Hegel or something, but that this thing about maybe the swing is going back. We got Acton saying power tends to corrupt, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and then there's a dialectic and it builds up.
Absolutely.
And maybe, we have an election coming up now. What do you think is going to happen? We're now talking in the midst of the Democratic Convention up in Boston. This program is being aired, it's being aired and so forth. What do you think is going to happen? Will the memory of Robert Kennedy resound in that hall, do you think?
Well, I think so. It does.
The Democratic Party going to get some get up and go, or what?
Right. Well, Arianna Huffington wrote an open letter to John Kerry saying, read Robert Kennedy's speeches, and that's when I was putting the finishing touches on manuscript.
Well,
so I felt very good
go to
about
the
that.
Gospel according to RFK.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think. Well, the Kerry campaign has the book.
Uh-huh.
The Edwards campaign has the book.
Yeah.
Edwards certainly, with his To America's speech, taps into the same, a somewhat bourgeoisified version of Robert Kennedy's speeches about economic justice. Robert Kennedy wasn't so interested in making everyone middle class. I think he wanted to make people alive and fulfill their
potential,
what they were born with, their gifts. You know,
not a bad.
I think that's why I like him so much.
Not a bad,
because that's what I feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Too.
Not a bad aim for us all to have about our fellow human beings, right? We want, if we had everybody thinking we want everyone to realize the best that they have, and living a life like that, it gets down to treat everybody the way you want to be treated.
Absolutely.
It's a basic premise that is part of a
society. It goes
society.
from the golden rule to anarchism. It's, you know, treat, you know.
Yeah, right.
Call your.
Yeah, and in journalism, there's a saying. What's the saying? I'm not sure it was Mink, and I'm not sure who it was from. It says, "An ethic of journalism is bring comfort to the afflicted and afflict the comfortable."
Absolutely,
yeah.
I love that. I think
that's an ethic. I wonder, do you think it is?
It's Whitman, I think.
That's an ethic.
It's Whitman.
Oh, is it Whitman?
It's Whitman.
No, Whitman had another one, I know. Yeah,
well, it's very similar.
Yeah, would have been similar. And all the great poets are giving comfort to the slaves and scaring the bejesus out of the tyrants or something like that. But that's kind of thing. But it's almost all observed in the breach in terms of the everyday thing. Everybody is serving mammon, it seems, in terms of the ones, because those guys that are the oppressors, those mafia dons have all the money.
We went through this national brainwashing of the Reagan years and trickle-down economics, and you just must, you know,
still in it.
Greed is good, and to a great extent we are, and I think it's really coarsened and polluted American life. I was trying to get the figures for the gap between rich and poor and how it increased from '68 to now, and I actually haven't been able to find.
You can't get numbers large enough. The gap that's going. You know, it really is.
It's something.
Well, if we really want to move toward that, and it seems to me all responsible people are certainly that they can't do better. It seems to me than perhaps to recall the speeches and the presence and the ethics and the morals. Nobody's absolutely perfect. There are problems in everybody's life, but on the whole, the example that was set by Robert Kennedy, and you've put together the gospel according to the man, why it matters now. Let's let people see again what it looks like. And this has been put together, very interesting compilation of his speeches, major speeches during the period of his campaign, brief in 1968, a crucial time, evolution of the society. And it's been written by our author, put together with comment by him on each of the speeches by Norman MacAfee and MacAfee. That's right. MacAfee.
It means the people of ancient wisdom.
Does it really?
It does.
Very good. Well, Norman, thank you very much for coming in, and for the book, and for all the work.
Thank you for inviting me.
Didn't
Harold.
get a chance to talk in much depth about some of the other translations you've done. You had a really rich academic and career. And
well, I'm not academic, but
no, not academic, intellectual career.
Yeah, intellectual.
Free, public
and
intellectual.
Artistic.
And artistic, a real subversive type in terms of the society.
I hope so.
Yes, we hope so. May you subvert away the pillars of this
I was
injustice.
happy to see that you had interviewed Barbara Garson and Ed Sanders.
Oh, Ed Sanders.
Long ago.